First of all, let me clarify what I mean by liberal. We can distinguish two sorts of liberalism, okay? One is action. How much freedom of action are we going to extend to people? And then another kind of freedom is how much freedom of thought and expression we're going to extend to people. And obviously these are different kinds of freedom. In the United Kingdom, you are not allowed to drive at 200 miles an hour down the motorway, so your behaviour is restricted. But of course, you can argue that you would like to drive at 200 miles an hour down the motorway, and you can express that point of view and no one will lock you up. So there's very little constraint on what you can think or what you can say, but of course there is constraint on your behaviour. So here's a different kind of scale that I'm going to look at, and it's freedom of thought and expression. Okay? To what extent should people be encouraged to think independently, to question, to make up their own minds, rather than defer more or less uncritically to some external authority, particularly on moral and religious issues? So it seems to me that we used to be more up this end of the scale in the United Kingdom, and then since the 60s we've been moving in this direction more and more and more, and now people are saying no, too far, start to come back in this direction again. And I'm going to suggest that we really should stay up that end of the scale, is what I'm going to suggest. But that's not to say, here's another scale. This is about freedom of action. Okay? You could be very liberal because you're a hippie anarchist, and so you let your children do whatever they like, and there's no structure or discipline or rules, and they just run amok. That would be very liberal with a small L, okay, with a small L. Or you could be very authoritarian with a small a, and that would mean you were very strict and disciplined, and the children must comb their hair the right way and polish their shoes and do what you tell them to do in terms of great control over the behaviour. Now, people argue that we're too liberal in this direction in the West now, and that maybe they're right. You know, maybe there's a case for saying that children need rules and discipline and structure and so on, and I think there is some truth to that. I'm willing to be persuaded that we need a bit more structure and discipline and rules when it comes to children. Maybe that's a good thing. But it doesn't follow that we should be more authoritarian with a capital A, i.e. that we should start telling them what they have to think and suppressing questions and suppressing thinking. That doesn't follow at all. That's a different kind of debate. And so what I'm suggesting is, wherever you are on the vertical axis, you should be that side on the horizontal axis. Okay? We should be defending freedom of thought and expression and encouraging children to think and question, rather than encouraging them to be uncritical acceptors of whatever we tell them about right and wrong and God and so on. But you can do all of that while having plenty of rules and discipline and structure in your schools. It is not incompatible. Unfortunately, these two things are often muddled together, and if I say I want children to think and question, the response will be, so you don't want discipline. You're an anarchist. You're just going to let children run amok, and we all know what's going to happen then. This is just a confusion. Okay, this is a muddle. So we separate these two questions out. Another myth that I want to deal with is that a liberal like me, somebody that encourages independent thinking and questioning in schools, is anti-religious. No. You can be religious and you can be liberal, in my sense, with a capital L. You can say, I believe in God, and I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and I believe these things, but I don't want you to believe it because I tell you. I want you to think about it and make up your own mind. Okay? I want you to ask me questions. Ask me difficult questions. Ask me searching questions. That's the approach that I'm going to take. So that's a very liberal approach, despite being religious. So you can have religious schools that are very liberal, and in fact, some religious schools are very liberal. So that's good, and I have no problem with that at all. So let's not muddle up the issue of religion with the issue of being liberal or authoritarian. These are different questions. Atheists I happen to be an atheist. I understand that's not a very popular view here. But I don't want to deny that atheists can be authoritarian with a capital A. They can be very interested in controlling what you're thinking and what you're saying. In North Korea here, if you say the wrong things, if you think the wrong thoughts, you're going to find yourself in big trouble very, very quickly, because atheism is the state doctrine and it is imposed on you and it is imposed on your thinking, and you must conform. Your thoughts must conform, or else. So this is a very brutal authoritarian form of atheism. And in Stalinist Russia, you find, not the Holy Inquisition hunting down religious heretics, but the secret police hunting down political heretics. They both have the same basic obsession. What's going on in your head? What thoughts are you thinking? What have you been saying? Both very much concerned with that. So again, here's my scale from liberal to authoritarian, and I've now got another scale, religious and atheist. There are religious authoritarians, very traditional religious people. Many popes have been authoritarian. Some of the things the current pope has said suggest to me that he's quite authoritarian. He's been talking about obedience and discipline a lot in America recently. So I think the Pope is probably someone who would discourage independent thinking and questioning, certainly in religious schools. But I don't know, I have to ask him somewhere meeting. But you can also have atheist authoritarians, so Joe Stalin is a very, very brutal example of such an authoritarian. Okay, no. But you can also have religious people who are liberal. So the former Professor Emeritus of Theology, Divinity at Oxford University, I know. And I said, where are you on here? And he said, top left-hand corner. I'm a liberal like you, but I'm religious. So you can be a religious liberal, you can encourage independent thought and questioning, still be very religious indeed. These are not incompatible positions. And then, of course, you could be a liberal atheist, like me, that's what I am, or like Richard Dawkins, a famous critic of religion in the UK and the US. Now, it seems to me that the big battle which has been going on is between the bottom and the top. Everyone's fighting this fight, certainly in the UK. Atheists attack religion, and the religious return fire, and there's a great deal of heat and smoke, and we obscure what I think is the more important battle, which is the battle between the people on the left of this diagram and the people on the right. I suspect that people like Richard Dawkins, who attack religion, probably have far more in common with people like Keith Ward than they do with people like Joe Stalin. I think that he should probably be defending not so much atheism, but liberalism, which seems to be the more important thing to defend. But unfortunately, he keeps picking the wrong fight, the fight with the religious. And of course, he then alienates people like Keith Ward. They're not going to agree with him because he's attacking religion. Whereas the truth is that Keith Ward and Richard Dawkins have a great deal more in common, actually, than they disagree about. So I think that this debate is the really important debate, and this debate, okay, it's an interesting debate, but it's not as important as this one. So I'm suggesting go that or be this side.